The Settings button opens a window showing all the functions that can be modified in the processor. The default option that is shown when the Settings window is first opened is Labels. This allows you to edit the name of the processor and the input and output channels. The processor name can be up to 16 characters and the input and output channels can be up to 6 characters. The processor name appears in the project window and the input and output names appear in both the routing and delay and gains and mute windows. With all settings, once you have made a change to any parameter, you have the option to click Apply to accept your changes or Cancel to ignore them. Once you have finished with the settings window, click Close to close it. This happens automatically following certain functions such as firmware updates. The LAN settings show the current IP address, subnet mask and gateway. There is also the option to switch from a default mode, which is dynamic IP, where the IP address is automatically assigned by a DHCP server on the network, or static IP, where the IP address has to be manually entered for each device on the network. A new IP address for the processor can be entered in the section below the mode selection if you have selected static IP. Static IP has a number of advantages, particularly if you are networking large numbers of processors, but we would recommend using dynamic IP mode unless you are experienced at configuring Ethernet networks. Note that you can only change between dynamic and static IP whilst connected using either USB or RS485. It wouldn't make sense to make changes to the IP whilst connected via TCP IP, as the moment you change the IP, you'd instantly lose connection to the processor. The RS485 option shows the current 485 ID and gives you the option to select a new ID from 1 to 32. All devices on an RS485 network must have a unique ID. The group reset refers to the group function in the project window. If you have removed either or both the input channels from a group, any gain added by the group to the channel will still be present, so the group reset allows you to reset the group settings, removing the group gain to restore the gain that has been selected using the channel gain fader only. Recall mode gives you options for how the channels behave when a factory preset or program file is loaded. If the preset includes channel links, you can choose to have these retained. Likewise, any input mutes in the preset can also be retained. Output mutes offers 3 options. None means that all outputs will remain unmuted regardless of the mute settings in the preset. Keep output mutes will revert to whatever the mutes are set to in the preset. Mute channels will always mute all outputs when recalling a preset. This is the safest option as it avoids the possibility of a sudden unexpected jump in system volume when a preset is recalled. The user section allows the controls available to the user to be modified depending on whether they are logged in at basic level, the default, or expert. This makes it possible for the system integrator to allow whatever degree of control they decide for the end user. You could, for example, leave a venue operator with just a view of input and output meters, but let a house technician have a little more control, say the gain and mute page, by giving them a password for expert mode. Note you need to be logged in at admin level to modify this section. The admin page allows someone logged in at admin level to modify passwords. The default passwords are admin 111111 and expert 222222. New passwords can be any alphanumeric word or number up to 6 characters. Note, see the Admin and Expert Mode chapter for details of the extra features in these modes. Output enables an input and output clip limiter to ensure that the processor cannot clip its internal A to D or D to A sections regardless of the parameters that have been set. This is enabled by default and we would recommend keeping it enabled. Factory Reset will restore all default factory settings and will overwrite all current settings, so should only be used if you definitely don't mind losing any program settings, if a rental processor has been returned from a dry hire, for example. System Locks gives you the opportunity to lock either the desktop application or processor front panel to prevent tampering. The lock and unlock code is the password for your level of operation as set in the admin section. Backup allows you to save the entire processor configuration as a file or restore the configuration from a file. Be aware that restoring from a file will overwrite all settings, including any stored presets. Firmware update shows the processor unique ID plus the software and firmware versions currently installed. If Martin Audio have notified you that a firmware update is available, a firmware file with the extension .sfu will be made available either as a download from the website or via email. Click the Update Firmware box and click Apply. Navigate to the file location where you have saved the SFU file. The window will show the progress of the upgrade and the front panel of the processor will show Firmware Update. When complete, you'll see a window showing firmware successfully loaded.